She's the one who crashed an entire squadron, and now they hired her to fly with 265 souls on board. The sneer crackled through the cockpit radio, followed by the co-pilot's sideways glance, half fear, half disgust. The woman in the left seat said nothing, only tightened her grip on the control column and cleared for takeoff in a calm, steady tone. None of them knew that the navigation chip beneath her hand, the same one every F-20 in service depended on, had been stolen from her 3 years ago. And today, as their flight crossed into restricted airspace, those very jets were about to expose what the world had buried. The so-called hired pilot was the one who wrote their code. Era Voss sat there, her face still as stone, her dark hair pulled back in a simple bun, no trace of makeup on her skin. She wore a plain navy blazer, the kind you'd find at a thrift store, and a white shirt that looked like it had been ironed one too many times. The co-pilot, a wiry guy named Mitch with a gelled haircut, and a smirk that never quit, kept stealing glances at her like he was waiting for her to crack. He didn't know her. Nobody on this flight did. They just knew the story, the one the papers ran 3 years ago about the disgraced Air Force pilot who'd botched a mission so bad it cost lives. That's what they thought they knew. Era's fingers moved over the controls, steady as ever, while the plane climbed into the gray Atlantic sky. The radio chatter faded, but the weight of that sneer hung in the air. She glanced at a small worn photo tucked into her flight bag, a younger version of herself, standing beside an F-20 prototype, her eyes bright with purpose. She tucked it away and focused on the horizon. The flight was a VIP run, a private charter crossing the ocean packed with suits who thought they owned the world. Era was just the hired help, the pilot they'd scraped from the bottom of some budget airlines roster. The crew lounge before takeoff had been a gauntlet of whispers and side eyes. A mechanic, a beefy guy with grease-stained hands and a superiority complex, leaned against a toolbox and laughed loud enough for her to hear. This is who they got for the Atlantic run, a washed-up reject who couldn't hack it in the Air Force. Era didn't flinch. She just kept checking her flight plan, her pen moving in neat, deliberate strokes. Another tech, a skinny kid with a nervous laugh, chimed in. Bet she's never even seen a real jet up close. Probably got her license from a mail-order catalog. The room snickered. Era set her clipboard down, looked straight at the kid and said, "You done?" The kid froze. His laugh stuck in his throat, and the room went quiet for a beat before they all turned away. As Era walked to the plane, a ground crew supervisor, a woman with a tight ponytail and a clipboard clutched like a shield, blocked her path. "You sure you're cleared for this, Voss? I mean, we all know your history." Her voice dripped with fake concern, loud enough for the nearby crew to turn and stare. Era stopped her bag slung over one shoulder and looked at the woman. "Check the roster. My name's on it." The supervisor's smile faltered, but she stepped aside, muttering under her breath about standards dropping. Era kept walking her boots steady on the tarmac, but her fingers brushed the edge of her flight bag where that old photo lay hidden. She didn't need to look at it to remember why she was here. Up in the air, the cabin crew wasn't any kinder. The lead flight attendant, a woman named Carla, with perfect curls and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, made a point of leaning into the first-class cabin and whispering to a passenger, "Don't worry about the turbulence. It's just the pilot. Well, let's just say the company cut corners hiring her." The passenger, a guy in a tailored suit with a watch that cost more than Era's yearly salary, snorted. "Figures. You get what you pay for." Carla nodded, all fake concern, and shot a glance toward the cockpit door. Era caught it through the reflection in a panel. She didn't say a word, just adjusted her headset and kept her eyes on the horizon. The plane hummed steady under her hands, climbing smooth like it knew who was flying it. In the galley, a junior flight attendant, a young guy named Tim, with acne scars and a nervous habit of cracking his knuckles, whispered to Carla, "I heard she got people killed, like a whole mission gone wrong because of her." His voice carried deliberate, like he wanted Era to hear. She was checking the fuel gauges, her hands steady, but her jaw tightened for a split second. Carla smirked, stirring her coffee. "Yeah, and now we're stuck with her. Hope you packed a parachute." They laughed low and mean as Era flipped a switch, her movements precise, her face blank. She didn't need to respond. The plane was her answer, steady and true, under her control. The insults kept coming sharp and relentless, like darts thrown at someone who refused to duck. A businesswoman in a red power suit, her nails tapping on a laptop, muttered to her seatmate, "I heard she got kicked out for crashing a whole squadron. Who lets someone like that near a plane?" Her seatmate, a guy with a fake tan and a gold chain, laughed. Probably slept her way into this gig. Look at her. No makeup, no style. She's got no business being up there. Era's hand paused on the throttle for half a second, just long enough for Mitch to notice. He smirked again, leaning back in his seat. You hearing this, Voss? They're not wrong. Era turned her head just a fraction and met his eyes. Focus on your job, Mitch. Her voice was low even, but it cut like a blade. Mitch blinked, then looked away suddenly, real interested in his gauges. The plane hit cruising altitude, and for a moment it was just the hum of the engines and the endless gray outside. Then the radar pinged, a faint signal irregular like a ghost in the system. Era's eyes narrowed. She tapped the screen, watching the code flicker. It wasn't random noise. It was a military frequency, old but familiar one she hadn't seen since her Air Force days. Her fingers hovered over the controls, tracing the signal's pattern. She knew it. She'd written it. 3 years ago in a lab under fluorescent lights, she'd built the ethics override system, a navigation protocol that could stop a fighter jet from firing on civilians. They had taken it from her, claimed she'd died in a test explosion, and buried her name. But here it was alive in the system, talking to her plane. As Era studied the signal, a passenger in first class, a tech CEO with slicked back hair and a custom suit, stood up waving his phone. He was on a video call, his voice loud enough to carry to the cockpit. Yeah, this pilot's a joke. Nobody who got fired from the military. I'm telling you, we're lucky this plane's still in the air. The other passengers chuckled, their voices a low hum of agreement. Era's fingers froze on the radar screen just for a moment before she resumed typing. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The signal on the screen was growing stronger, and she knew what it meant. Someone was watching her, using her own code against her. She radioed ground control, her voice steady. This is Flight 827. I'm picking up an unauthorized signal on our nav system. Can you confirm? The response came back sharp, dismissive. No signal on our end, Captain Voss. Check your equipment. Or your eyes. The voice belonged to a supervisor named Greg, a guy with a nasally tone and a reputation for hating anyone who questioned him. Era's jaw tightened, but she didn't push back. Instead, she started logging the data, her fingers flying over the panel, saving every byte. Mitch raised an eyebrow. What's that about? You seeing ghosts now? Era didn't look at him. Just doing my job. She kept recording her movements precise, like she was stitching together a case nobody else could see. The signal grew stronger, and the plane's system started to glitch. Lights flickered in the cockpit. The autopilot stuttered. Era switched to manual control, her hands steady on the yoke. Mitch sat up, his smirk gone. What the hell's going on? He muttered. Era didn't answer. She was watching the radar, where the signal was now broadcasting a code she'd never forget. Her code. Someone was using her ethics override to track this plane, a civilian flight, with 265 people on board. Her stomach twisted, not with fear, but with something heavier: betrayal. They'd stolen her work, erased her name, and now they were using it to mess with her flight. She leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. You're not getting away with this. In the cabin, the mood was shifting. A group of passengers near the front, led by a hedge fund manager with a loud voice and a Rolex that flashed under the cabin lights, started complaining. This is ridiculous, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I paid for a smooth flight, not some amateur hour with a pilot who can't handle a little turbulence. He turned to Carla, who was passing by with a tray of drinks. You need to get someone competent up there. Carla nodded, her lips tight, and shot another glance at the cockpit. Era caught the exchange in the reflection of a monitor. She adjusted her headset, her fingers brushing the photo in her bag again, and kept flying. The plane was steady, but the air around her was anything but. The cabin crew started to notice. Carla poked her head into the cockpit, her fake smile replaced by a scowl. Passengers are asking questions. You're making us look bad, Voss. Fix it. Era didn't turn around. Tell them to buckle up. Carla huffed and stormed off. Mitch, now sweating, snapped. You're not in charge here, Voss. Don't act like you're running the show. Era's eyes flicked to him, cold and steady. I'm flying the plane, Mitch. You got a problem with that? He opened his mouth, then shut it, his face red. Outside, the sky was still gray, but the radar was lighting up now, a cluster of signals closing in fast. Military. F-20s. Era's pulse stayed even, but her grip on the controls tightened. As the F-20s closed in, a passenger in a pinstripe suit, a lawyer with a sharp jaw and a habit of talking over everyone, stood up and banged on the cockpit door. What's going on up there? Are we gonna crash because of this? A nobody pilot. His voice was loud, performative, like he was auditioning for a news segment. Other passengers murmured, some nodding, some filming on their phones. Era didn't turn around. She was too busy entering commands, her fingers moving with a precision that belied the chaos around her. Carla tried to calm the lawyer down, but he pushed past her, shouting, "I want answers. Who's flying this plane?" Era's voice came over the intercom, calm and clear. "Sit down, sir. We're handling it." The lawyer froze, his face red, but he sat muttering about lawsuits. The radio crackled again, this time with a voice that wasn't ground control. It was military, clipped and urgent. "Flight 827, you've entered restricted airspace. Identify yourself or prepare to be engaged." The words hit the cockpit like a shockwave. Mitch went pale, his hands fumbling with his headset. Era didn't blink. She keyed the mic, her voice calm. "This is Captain Era Voss. Flight 827. We're a civilian charter with 265 passengers. Requesting clearance." The response came fast, cold. "Negative. Flight 827. Your systems are compromised. Divert immediately or we will fire." Passengers started shouting in the cabin, their voices leaking through the cockpit door. Carla burst in again, her face flushed. "They're freaking out." "What did you do?" Era's eyes stayed on the radar. "Sit down, Carla." Now, in the chaos, a young passenger, a college kid with a backpack and a nervous habit of chewing his nails, slipped a note under the cockpit door. It was crumpled, written in shaky handwriting. "I believe in you. My dad was a pilot. Keep us safe." Era saw it, her eyes lingering on the words for a moment before she tucked it into her pocket. She didn't say anything, but her shoulders squared and she leaned into the controls with a new kind of focus. The F-20s were visible now, their shapes cutting through the clouds, their weapons locked on. She knew what they were running, her system. Her code twisted against her. But she also knew its weaknesses. She just needed time. The F-20s appeared on the horizon, sleek and deadly, their shapes cutting through the clouds. The radio buzzed with passenger chatter, now someone live streaming from the cabin. A guy's voice, smug and loud, carried through. "This is what happens when you let a woman fly. Total disaster. I'm posting this everywhere." Era's fingers paused on the controls just for a second before she kept moving. She didn't have time for him. The radar showed the jets closing in, their systems locked onto her plane. She recognized the targeting pattern, her pattern. The ethics override was running, but it was corrupted, twisted to track her instead of protect her. She leaned forward, her voice low, almost to herself. "You thought you could erase me?" She opened a panel under the console, revealing a manual override system nobody else on the plane knew about. Her fingers moved fast, entering a string of code from memory. 7 seconds. That's all she needed. The F-20s systems froze their targeting screens, going blank. The radio erupted with confused chatter from the jets. "What the hell, systems offline?" Era didn't smile. She just kept flying, her hands steady, guiding the plane through the gap she'd created. Mitch stared at her, his mouth open. "How did you—" Era cut him off. "Not now." The passengers didn't know it, but she had just saved their lives. For now. As the plane stabilized, a senior flight attendant, a man named Roger with graying hair and a permanent frown, stormed into the cockpit. "You're gonna get us all killed, Voss. You think you're some hotshot because you punched in a code." His voice was loud, shaking, and he pointed a finger at her like she was a child. Era didn't look at him. She was recalibrating the navigation system, her fingers moving with surgical precision. "Roger, get back to the cabin," she said, her voice even but firm. He didn't move, his face red with anger. "You don't tell me what to do. You're nobody." Era's eyes flicked up, meeting his for a split second. "I'm the one keeping you alive." Roger froze, then backed off, muttering curses as he left. The plane landed hard at an alternate airport, a military strip on the edge of the ocean. The moment the wheels touched down, the world outside exploded with noise. News vans, helicopters, reporters shouting into microphones. Era taxied to a stop, her face unreadable. The radio crackled with a new voice, a colonel with a gravelly tone. "Captain Voss, you are under arrest for unauthorized use of military technology. Exit the aircraft." Era unbuckled her seatbelt, her movements slow, deliberate. She stood, straightened her blazer, and looked at Mitch. "You're welcome," she said, her voice flat. He just stared, his hands shaking. Carla was in the doorway, her eyes wide. "You're a traitor," she hissed. Era didn't answer. She just walked past her steps, even her head high. Outside the tarmac was a circus. A news anchor, a woman with a shrill voice and a microphone clutched like a weapon, shoved her way forward. "Captain Voss, how does it feel to betray your country?" she shouted, her cameraman zooming in. Era kept walking, her face calm, but her hand brushed the pocket where the college kid's note sat. She didn't stop, didn't answer. A soldier stepped in front of her, his face young but hard. "You're coming with us." Era nodded, her eyes steady. "Lead the way." The crowd parted, but their voices didn't stop a wall of accusations and jeers. She walked through it like it was nothing. The terminal was chaos. Reporters shoved microphones in her face, shouting questions. "Did you hack the military? Are you a terrorist?" A woman in a bright blazer, her hair sprayed stiff, yelled, "Sources say you caused a crash 3 years ago. Why should we trust you now?" Era stopped just for a moment and looked at her. "You shouldn't." The reporter blinked, thrown off, and Era kept walking. Soldiers were waiting, their rifles lowered, but ready. A young officer, barely older than Era, stepped forward. "You used classified code. That's treason." Era met his eyes, her voice steady. "I wrote that code." He laughed, short and sharp. "Sure you did. The guy who created ethics override died in a lab explosion. Everyone knows that." Era's lips pressed into a thin line. "Do they?" In the holding room, a TV played in the corner, tuned to a news channel. A pundit, a man with a loud tie and a louder voice, was tearing into Era. "This woman's a fraud. She's playing the victim card, pretending she's some genius. The military doesn't make mistakes like this." Era sat at the table, her hands cuffed, her eyes fixed on the flickering light above. She didn't react, but her fingers traced the edge of the college kid's note through her pocket. The pundit kept going, his voice rising. "She's a danger to national security. Lock her up." The officer guarding her smirked, leaning against the wall. "You're famous now, Voss. Too bad it's for all the wrong reasons." Era didn't look at him. She just waited, her silence louder than his taunts. They cuffed her hands behind her back, the metal cold against her skin. The crowd parted as they led her to a holding area, a gray room with a single table and a flickering light. The officer sat across from her, his uniform crisp, his eyes narrow. "You're telling me you're the one who built ethics override? A disgraced pilot?" Era leaned back in her chair, her hands still cuffed. "Check the biometric lock. It'll tell you who I am." He scoffed, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He left the room and Era sat there staring at the wall, her fingers tapping a slow rhythm on the table. She knew what was coming. An hour later, the door burst open. The officer was back, his face pale, a tablet in his hand. It's verified," he stammered. "The system flagged you as creator. Era Voss. Active." The words hit the room like a bomb. Outside, the news was already breaking screens, lighting up with her name. A reporter's voice blared from a TV in the hall. "The pilot accused of treason is the creator of the F-20 navigation system. She just saved 265 lives." Era didn't react. She just stood, her cuffs still on, and waited. The officer fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking as he unlocked her. "Ma'am, we didn't know." Era rubbed her wrists, her voice quiet. "You weren't supposed to." As she walked out of the holding room, a junior officer, a woman with short hair and a nervous smile, approached her. "Captain Voss, I studied your work in flight school. The ethics override. It's why I joined." She held out a small pin, a silver wing from her uniform. "This is for you." Era looked at the pin, then at the woman. She took it, her fingers closing around it gently. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but steady. The officer nodded, her eyes bright, and stepped back. Era slipped the pin into her pocket next to the note and kept walking. The crowd outside was quieter now, some faces ashamed, others still skeptical. The fallout was immediate. The military issued a statement, claiming it was all a technical glitch, nothing to do with Era. A general, a man with gray hair and a chest full of medals, went on TV that night. "Captain Voss got lucky. She's not a hero. She's just a pilot who happened to be in the right place." Era watched the broadcast from a hotel room, her bag still packed, her blazer folded over a chair. She didn't change the channel. She just listened, her face blank as the general spun his story. Her phone buzzed with a message from a private number. "Name your price to stay quiet." She deleted it without a second thought. The next morning, headlines screamed about her unauthorized actions. They suspended her license pending investigation. At the airport hotel, a bartender, a grizzled man with tattoos and a kind smile, recognized her from the news. He slid a coffee across the counter. "No charge." "You did good up there, kid," he said, his voice low. "Don't let 'em tell you different." Era nodded, her fingers wrapping around the warm mug. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened for a moment. "Thanks," she said, taking a sip. The TV above the bar was still playing her story, but she didn't look at it. She just sat there, her bag at her feet, the weight of the world still on her shoulders. She didn't wait for their verdict. Era had kept recordings not just from the flight, but from 3 years ago. Conversations with her commanding officer, a man named General Holt, who'd claimed her work as his own. She uploaded them to a public server. No fanfare, no press release. Just a single file labeled Truth. The recording spread like wildfire. Holt's voice clear and smug, admitting he had faked her death to take credit for ethics override. Another clip older showed her system stopping a missile strike on a civilian village. By noon, the internet was ablaze. Protests erupted outside military bases. News anchors stumbled over apologies. The military had no choice. They reinstated her rank, issued a public apology, and renamed the F-20 system after her the Era system. Days later, at a small diner near the airport, a waitress, an older woman with tired eyes and a warm voice, stopped by Era's table. "You're her, aren't you?" The pilot. Era looked up from her coffee, her face guarded. The waitress smiled, setting down a slice of pie. "On the house. My son's in the Air Force. He says you're the real deal." Era's fingers paused on her cup, her eyes dropping to the pie. "Tell him thanks," she said, her voice quiet. The waitress nodded and walked away, leaving Era alone with her thoughts, the pie untouched, but the gesture heavy in the air. But the world wasn't done with her. At a press conference, a reporter with a slick suit and a fake smile leaned into his mic. "Some say you're just hyping yourself up. A female hero. Sounds like a PR stunt." Era stood at the podium, her hands folded, her plain blazer creased from travel. "I don't need your approval," she said, her voice steady. The room went quiet. Another voice, this one from a former colleague, a pilot named Derek, who'd sold her out years ago, piped up from the crowd. "You don't have the guts to hold onto that system, Voss. Hand it over to someone who can handle it." Era's eyes found him, and for a moment, the air felt heavy. "I already did," she said. "It's not mine anymore. It's theirs." She nodded toward the cameras, toward the world watching. Before the conference, a tech executive, a woman with sharp heels and a sharper tongue, cornered Era backstage. "You're sitting on a gold mine with that system," she said, her voice low, conspiratorial. "Sell it to us. You'll never have to fly another budget flight again." Era adjusted her bag, her eyes cold. "It's not for sale." The executive laughed like Era was a child. "Everyone has a price, sweetheart." Era stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Not me." She walked away, leaving the executive staring, her smile gone. The air crackled with tension, but Era didn't look back. The final test came at a global security conference months later. Era was there not as a guest, but as a speaker, her name now synonymous with the system that had saved lives. The room was packed with generals, tech moguls, and politicians, all watching her like she was a puzzle they couldn't solve. Then the alarms went off. A cyber attack targeting the Era system, trying to weaponize it. F-20s in the sky started to turn their systems hijacked. The room froze, people shouting into phones, screens flashing red. Era didn't hesitate. She walked to the control panel, her steps calm, her face set. She entered a final sequence, one she'd built into the system years ago. A kill switch. The military modules shut down, leaving only the humanitarian protocols. The jets stabilized their weapons offline. The room was silent for 20 seconds, every eye on her. As Era stepped away from the panel, a general in the front row, his uniform heavy with medals, stood up. "You had no authority to do that," he barked, his face red. "You've crippled our defenses." Era turned to him, her eyes steady, her voice calm. "I built it to save lives, not take them." The general opened his mouth, then closed it, his hands clenched. The room watched breathless as Era walked out her steps, even her blazer unchanged. The silence she left behind was louder than any applause. Era turned to the crowd, her voice quiet but clear. "Nobody gets to control life and death. Not me, not you." She stepped away from the panel, her hands steady, and walked out of the room. The consequences came fast. The mechanic who'd mocked her was fired, his name blacklisted from every airline. Carla's social media rants about Era went viral for all the wrong reasons, costing her a promotion. The businessman who'd live-streamed his insults lost his company's biggest sponsor. Derek, the ex-pilot, was dropped by his network, his reputation in ruins. Era didn't watch it unfold. She didn't need to. She kept moving her steps quiet, her head high. On her way out of the conference, a young girl, maybe 10 with braids and a notebook clutched to her chest, ran up to Era. "Are you the pilot who saved everyone?" she asked, her eyes wide. Era stopped, kneeling down to meet her gaze. "I just did my job," she said, her voice soft. The girl held out her notebook, open to a drawing of a plane with Era written across it in crayon. Era took it, her fingers lingering on the page. "Keep drawing," she said, handing it back. The girl beamed, and Era stood, her eyes lingering on her for a moment before she walked away. Years ago, a young woman stood in a lab, her hands on a keyboard, writing code that would save lives. She'd been mocked then too, told she didn't belong. She kept going. Today she walks through airports, her plain blazer and steady gaze unchanged. The world knows her name now, but she doesn't carry it like a crown. She carries it like a truth hard-won and undeniable. You've been there, haven't you? Judged, dismissed, erased. But you kept going too. You're still here? And so is she. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.